There's a strange kind of suffering that no one can see. You wake up, and before the day has even begun, their name appears in your mind. You try to focus, but a memory interrupts you. You try to move on, but something inside you keeps returning to the same face, the same voice, the same unfinished conversation. You tell yourself, I should be over this by now. But you're not. And the more you try not to think about them, the more powerful the thought becomes. It follows you in silence. It appears when you are alone. It visits you before sleep. It returns when you hear a song, pass a place, or remember the way they once looked at you. And perhaps the most painful part is this. You do not even know if they're thinking about you too. You are haunted by someone who may not even be present. Someone who may have left your life physically, but somehow remained inside your inner world. Carl Jung would not have dismissed this as weakness. He would not simply say, forget them. He would ask a deeper question. What part of your own unconscious has attached itself to this person? Because sometimes the person you cannot stop thinking about is not only a person. Sometimes they become a symbol, a mirror, a projection, a doorway into something hidden inside you, something unhealed, something unlived, something your soul has not yet integrated. And this is why they feel so powerful. Not because they necessarily hold power over you, but because your psyche has placed power inside their image. You may not only be missing them, you may be missing the version of yourself that awakened when they appeared. You may be grieving the part of you that felt alive around them. You may be chasing a feeling, a possibility, a future that never fully arrived. And until you understand what this person represents inside your inner world, you may continue to feel trapped by their memory. Not because you are broken, not because you are weak, but because the unconscious does not release what has not yet been understood. So in this reflection, we're going to explore what it really means when you cannot stop thinking about someone. Not from the surface, not from obsession, not from fantasy, but through the deep psychology of Carl Jung. Because the person living in your mind may be carrying a message from your own soul. And once you understand that message, something begins to change. You stop asking, why can't I forget them? And you begin asking, what are they showing me about myself? Before we go deeper, subscribe to the Kingdom Within if these reflections speak to something you have been silently carrying. This channel is for those who are ready to understand the hidden forces within themselves. There are people who pass through your life and leave almost no trace. You meet them, speak to them, share a few moments, and then they disappear from memory like footprints washed away by rain. But then there are others, people who enter your world and leave a mark so deep that time does not seem to erase it. Even if you do not speak to them anymore, even if years pass, even if your life has changed, even if you know, rationally, that you should move forward, their image remains alive somewhere inside you. They become a psychological echo, a hidden room in your mind that you keep returning to. And this can be confusing because the conscious mind wants simple answers. It wants to know, do I still love them? Are they thinking about me? Was this connection real? Why can't I let go? But Jung understood that the psyche rarely speaks in simple answers. The psyche speaks in symbols, images, dreams, repetitions, attractions, triggers, longings. And sometimes, another person becomes the carrier of an unconscious symbol. You think you're obsessed with them, but in truth, you may be attached to what they awakened in you. This is one of the most important distinctions you can make. Because when you say, I cannot stop thinking about this person, you may believe the problem is the person, but the deeper issue is the emotional charge attached to them. In Jungian psychology, whenever something carries an intense emotional charge, it is not random. A neutral person does not dominate your mind. A meaningless encounter does not follow you for months. When someone becomes emotionally overwhelming, it usually means they have activated a complex. A complex is an emotionally charged pattern in the unconscious. It can be built around abandonment, rejection, the need to be chosen, the wound of not feeling enough, the longing to be seen, the hunger for love, the fear of being forgotten, the fantasy of being completed by another person. When you meet someone who touches one of these complexes, your reaction can feel much larger than the situation itself. You may barely know them, but they feel familiar. You may have spent only a short time with them, but they occupy your imagination. You may know they were not healthy for you, but your body still misses them. This is because the unconscious does not measure connection by time. It measures connection by symbolic intensity. A person can awaken in 1 week what has been sleeping inside you for 20 years. And when that happens, You do not simply move on because the calendar says enough time has passed. The psyche does not heal according to time. It heals according to integration. This is why some people can leave your life, but not your mind. The external relationship may be over, but the internal relationship continues. You still speak to them in your thoughts. You still imagine what you should have said. You still wonder what they felt. You still rewrite scenes. You still search for meaning in details. A look, a message, a silence, a goodbye, a moment that felt different. And slowly, the mind becomes a theater. They're no longer simply a person. They become a character in your inner drama. But Jung would say, pay attention to the drama, not because you should stay trapped inside it, but because the drama reveals the unconscious script you have been living. When someone lives too much in your mind, the question is not only, who are they? The deeper question is, who do I become when I think about them? Do you become anxious? Do you become small? Do you become hopeful? Do you become powerless? Do you become desperate to be chosen? Do you become angry? Do you become a child again, waiting for someone to come back and prove that you are lovable? This is where the truth begins, because the person you cannot stop thinking about often reveals the emotional age of the wound they touched. You may be an adult in the world, but inside that connection, you may feel like a child waiting at the door, waiting for a message, waiting for approval, waiting to be seen, waiting for someone emotionally unavailable to finally choose you. And this is why it hurts so deeply. It is not only about the person. It is about the old wound they reopened. Maybe they made you feel wanted and then withdrew. Maybe they gave you attention and then became distant. Maybe they awakened your heart and then left you confused. Maybe they saw something in you that you had forgotten existed. Maybe they made you feel alive, beautiful, powerful, needed, or special. And when they disappeared, it felt as if they took that version of you with them. But Jung would remind us, no one can take your soul from you. They can only awaken a part of it that you have not yet learned to own. This is the beginning of freedom, because as long as you believe they're the source of the feeling, you will chase them. But when you realize they were the mirror of something within you, you begin to reclaim your energy. You stop saying, they made me feel alive, and you begin asking, what part of me came alive in their presence? You stop saying, I need them to come back, and you begin asking, what did they awaken that I have abandoned in myself? You stop saying, I cannot live without them, and you begin asking, what part of my own life have I not fully entered? This is not easy, because obsession often disguises itself as love. Longing often disguises itself as destiny. Anxiety often disguises itself as intuition. An emotional addiction often disguises itself as a spiritual connection. That does not mean the connection was fake. It means the meaning of the connection may be deeper than the story your conscious mind created. Maybe they were not meant to complete you. Maybe they were meant to reveal where you are still fragmented. Maybe they were not sent to stay. Maybe they were sent to awaken something you had buried. Maybe the pain is not punishment. Maybe it is initiation. There is a painful truth that most people do not want to hear when they cannot stop thinking about someone. Sometimes, what you are attached to is not the person as they truly are. Sometimes, you are attached to the image your psyche created around them. This does not mean your feelings are false. It does not mean the connection meant nothing. But it does mean that your inner world may have added layers of meaning to this person that they may not actually possess in reality. Jung called this projection. Projection happens when something unconscious inside you is placed onto another person. You do not see them only as they are. You see them through your desires, your wounds, your fears, your fantasies, your unlived possibilities. You need to be chosen, your longing for union, your fear of abandonment. All of this can gather around one person until they no longer appear ordinary. They begin to feel symbolic, almost magical, almost destined, almost impossible to replace. And this is why you may find yourself saying, there is something different about them. I have never felt this way before. I cannot explain it, but I feel connected to them. They are not like everyone else. Sometimes this is true. Some people do awaken something genuinely profound in us. But Jung would ask you to be careful, because the unconscious can make a person appear larger than life when they are carrying a projection. When you project onto someone, you are not simply relating to them. You are relating to a part of yourself through them. This is why the attachment becomes so intense. You are not only afraid of losing them, you are afraid of losing access to the part of yourself they seem to represent. Maybe they represent freedom. Maybe they represent passion. Maybe they represent beauty. Maybe they represent mystery. Maybe they represent safety. Maybe they represent being wanted. Maybe they represent the life you secretly wish you had. Maybe they represent the person you believe you could become if they loved you back. This is where obsession begins. Because when another person carries your projection, they seem to hold the key to your wholeness. Their attention feels like oxygen. Their silence feels like punishment. Their absence feels like proof that something is wrong with you. Their approval feels like evidence that you are enough. Their rejection feels like evidence that you are not. But this is not love in its purest form. This is the psyche trying to retrieve something it has lost. And because you do not yet recognize that the lost thing belongs to you, you believe it belongs to them. So you chase, you wait, you analyze, you replay, you interpret, you search for signs. You wonder what they meant. You wonder why they changed. You wonder if they miss you. You wonder if they're hiding their feelings. You wonder if they will return. But beneath all these questions, there is a deeper one. What part of myself have I placed inside this person? This question begins to break the spell. Because projection is like a spell. You become enchanted by an image. You feel pulled by something invisible. You give the person more power than they may deserve. You ignore red flags. You romanticize pain. You call inconsistency mystery. You call emotional distance depth. You call anxiety chemistry. You call uncertainty destiny. And suddenly, the person who hurts you becomes the person you think you need. This is the dangerous side of projection. It can make the unavailable person seem more valuable than the available one. It can make emotional chaos feel more alive than peace. It can make a wound feel like a bond. It can make you confuse intensity with intimacy. And many people stay trapped here for years, not because the other person is extraordinary, but because the projection is powerful. The unconscious has dressed them in the clothing of your own missing self. This is why, when you try to forget them, it feels like you are betraying something sacred. Letting go of them feels like letting go of hope, letting go of beauty, letting go of the future you imagined, letting go of the part of you that felt awakened. But Jung would say, you do not have to kill the feeling. You have to understand where it comes from. The task is not to become cold. The task is to become conscious. Because when you withdraw a projection, you do not lose what was beautiful. You take it back into yourself. You realize, the beauty I saw in them was also my own capacity to perceive beauty. The depth I felt around them was also my own depth. The aliveness I experienced was also my own life force waking up. The love I wanted from them was also the love I had abandoned within myself. The power I gave them was power I had not claimed. This does not remove the pain immediately, but it changes the direction of healing. You stop trying to get yourself back through them, and you begin returning to yourself directly. This is one of the most important steps in individuation. Individuation is the Jungian process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not untouchable, not emotionally invincible. Whole. It means you stop seeking in others what must be integrated in yourself. You stop giving away your inner gold to people who may not even know what they are carrying for you. Jung often described how we place our inner gold onto others. We see something precious in them, but often, what we see is connected to an undeveloped part of ourselves. We hand them our gold. Then we become devastated when they leave, ignore us, disappoint us, or fail to live up to the image. But the gold was never truly theirs. They carried it for a time. They helped you see it. But eventually, the soul asks you to reclaim it. And this reclamation can feel like heartbreak, because the ego wants the person, but the soul wants integration. The ego says, I need them. The soul says, you need yourself. The ego says, they're the answer. The soul says, they're the mirror. The ego says, if they come back, I will be whole. The soul says, if you become conscious, you will stop abandoning yourself. This is difficult because the fantasy is often sweeter than the truth. The fantasy says, they will realize your value. They will come back changed. They will finally say what you needed to hear. They will explain everything. They will choose you. They will prove the connection was real. The truth may be quieter. The truth may say, they touched a wound. They awakened a longing. They reflected a missing part of you. They showed you where you still seek completion outside yourself. They revealed how much of your energy is still dependent on being chosen. And while the fantasy keeps you waiting, the truth begins to set you free. But freedom does not come by force. You cannot simply command yourself to stop thinking about someone. The mind does not obey violence. If you shame yourself for missing them, the feeling moves deeper into the unconscious. If you pretend you are healed when you are not, the projection will return in another form. This is why Jungian healing requires honesty. You must be willing to say, yes, I think about them. Yes, I miss them. Yes, I feel attached. Yes, part of me still wants them. Yes, this hurts. But then you must go one step deeper. What am I really longing for through them? This question changes everything. Maybe you're not longing only for their body, their voice, their attention, or their presence. Maybe you're longing for the version of yourself that existed when you felt desired. Maybe you're longing for the hope you felt when the connection began. Maybe you're longing for the feeling of being emotionally alive. Maybe you're longing for the safety you never received. Maybe you're longing for the proof that you're not easy to forget. Maybe you are longing to be chosen by the very kind of person who once made you feel rejected. When you begin to see this, the obsession becomes less mysterious. It becomes meaningful. Painful, yes, but meaningful. And meaning is the beginning of transformation. Because what remains unconscious controls you. But what becomes conscious can be integrated. There is always a wound behind obsession. Not always a dramatic wound. Not always something obvious. Sometimes the wound is quiet. A childhood where love felt inconsistent. A parent who was physically present but emotionally distant. A home where you had to earn attention. A relationship where you were chosen and then suddenly discarded. A moment when you opened your heart and were met with silence. A pattern of feeling almost loved but never fully held. And then one day, someone appears. They look at you in a certain way. They speak to the part of you that has been starving. They make you feel seen. They make you feel chosen. They make you feel that maybe, finally, someone understands the hidden world inside you. And because the wound has been waiting for this feeling for so long, the attachment becomes immediate. It does not feel ordinary. It feels like recognition. It feels like fate. It feels like your nervous system has found the person it has been searching for. But Jung would ask, is this recognition of the soul or recognition of a wound? Because sometimes the people who feel most familiar are not always the people who are healthiest for us. Sometimes they feel familiar because they match an old emotional pattern. They recreate a feeling we already know. The uncertainty, the longing, the waiting, the distance, the need to prove ourselves, the hope that this time someone unavailable will finally become available. This is one of the most painful truths in human relationships. We often do not chase what is good for us. We chase what feels familiar to the unconscious. And the unconscious does not always seek happiness first. It seeks resolution. It returns to old wounds, hoping for a different ending. So if you grew up feeling unseen, you may become attached to someone whose attention feels rare and precious. If you grew up having to earn love, you may become attached to someone who makes you work for affection. If you were abandoned emotionally, you may become attached to someone who gives you just enough closeness to awaken hope, then enough distance to awaken fear. If you're made to feel not enough, you may become attached to someone whose approval feels like salvation. And suddenly, you're not simply relating to a person. You're trying to repair your past through them. You're trying to win an old battle in a new body. You're trying to make the unavailable become available. You're trying to make the distant one stay. You're trying to make the silent one speak. You're trying to make the person who triggered your wound become the one who heals it. But the person who activates your wound is not always capable of healing it. Sometimes they're only capable of revealing it. And this is why you cannot stop thinking about them. Because your psyche believes there is something unfinished, not only between you and them, but between you and yourself, between you and your past, between you and the part of you that never received what it needed. The mind says, I need closure from them. But the soul may be saying, you need closure from the wound. The mind says, I need them to explain why they acted that way. But the soul may be saying, you need to understand why their behavior had so much power over your sense of worth. The mind says, I need them to choose me. But the soul may be saying, you need to stop choosing people who make you feel impossible to choose. This is where the healing becomes deeper. Because as long as you believe the pain is only about this person, you'll keep searching for answers in their behavior. You will analyze their messages, their silence, their timing, their words, their withdrawal, their inconsistency, their last conversation, their social media, their possible feelings. But Jung would turn your attention inward. Not because the other person does not matter, but because the source of your suffering is not only what happened. It is what was activated inside you. Two people can experience the same silence and react very differently. One person may feel disappointed and move on. Another may feel destroyed. Why? because silence does not land on everyone the same way. For one person, silence is simply silence. For another, silence is abandonment. For another, silence is rejection. For another, silence is proof they are not enough. For another, silence is the return of an old terror. The external event may be small, but the internal meaning may be enormous. This is why you must ask, what did this person make me feel about myself? Not just what did they do, but what did their behavior awaken in me? Did they make you feel invisible? Did they make you feel replaceable? Did they make you feel desperate? Did they make you feel like you had to perform to be loved? Did they make you feel like your emotions were too much? Did they make you feel like you were waiting for permission to exist? These feelings are clues. They point to the wound beneath the obsession. And when you find the wound, you begin to understand the attachment. Because obsession is often the mind's attempt to gain control over emotional helplessness. When something hurts and you cannot resolve it, the mind keeps returning to it. It tries to solve the unsolvable. It tries to find the missing piece. It tries to predict the future. It tries to prevent the pain from happening again. This is why you replay everything. You're not crazy. Your psyche is trying to protect you. It believes that if it understands every detail, it will finally be safe. If you can decode their silence, you will stop feeling powerless. If you can understand why they left, you will stop feeling abandoned. If you can prove they cared, you will stop feeling foolish. If you can find evidence that the connection was real, you will stop feeling alone in the memory. But the mind cannot always heal what the heart is still grieving. Analysis can become another form of attachment. You think you're trying to understand, but sometimes you're keeping the person alive inside you by continuously studying them. You keep reopening the wound, hoping the wound will give you an answer. But wounds do not heal by being reopened. They heal by being held. This is the shift. Instead of asking, why do they do this to me? Begin asking, what part of me is still bleeding from this? Instead of asking, did they care? Ask, why do I need their care to validate what I felt? Instead of asking, will they come back? Ask, what am I afraid will happen if they never do? Because that fear is important. If the thought of them never returning makes you feel empty, worthless, unlovable, or erased, then the attachment is touching something deeper than romance. It is touching identity. It is touching self-worth. It is touching the child inside you who learned to measure love through someone else's presence. And Jung would say this is where the shadow enters. The shadow is not only the dark, ugly, or destructive part of us. The shadow is everything we have pushed out of consciousness. Everything we were not allowed to be. Everything we were ashamed to feel. Everything we denied in order to survive. Your neediness may be in the shadow. Your anger may be in the shadow. Your desire may be in the shadow. Your fear of abandonment may be in the shadow. Your hunger for love may be in the shadow. Your jealousy may be in the shadow. Your vulnerability may be in the shadow. Your power may be in the shadow too. And when someone activates your shadow, you may feel possessed by emotions that seem bigger than you. You may think, why am I acting like this? Why do I care so much? Why do I feel desperate? Why do I want someone who is not giving me peace? Why do I keep checking? Why do I keep hoping? This is shadow material rising to the surface. Not to shame you, to be integrated. The obsession is not only about wanting someone. It is about meeting the parts of yourself you have not wanted to face. Maybe you do not want to admit how deeply you long to be loved. Maybe you do not want to admit how angry you are. Maybe you do not want to admit that you feel abandoned. Maybe you do not want to admit that part of you still believes you must be chosen to be valuable. Maybe you do not want to admit that you gave someone too much power because you were afraid to stand alone. But whatever you refuse to admit will control you from the unconscious. This is one of Jung's great insights. Until the unconscious becomes conscious, it directs your life, and you call it fate. You may call it destiny. You may call it soul connection. You may call it a sign. You may call it love. But if it is driven by unconscious wounds, it will not feel like freedom. It will feel like compulsion. And this is how you know the difference. Love may hurt, but it does not destroy your relationship with yourself. Love may bring longing, but it does not make you abandon your dignity. Love may be uncertain, but it does not require you to live in psychological captivity. A wound, however, pulls you into repetition. It makes you crave the person who activates your insecurity. It makes you confuse emotional danger with passion. It makes you accept crumbs because crumbs feel better than nothing. It makes you wait for someone who has not shown they can meet you. It makes you believe that if you suffer enough, the story will become meaningful. But suffering is not proof of love. Intensity is not proof of depth. And longing is not proof of destiny. Sometimes longing is proof that an old wound has found a familiar face. This is why healing requires honesty. You must be willing to look at the connection without romanticizing your pain. Ask yourself, did this person bring me closer to myself? Or did I become smaller around them? Did I feel peaceful or constantly uncertain? Did I feel seen or did I keep trying to be seen? Did I feel chosen or did I keep auditioning for love? Did I love them as a real human being or did I love the possibility of what they could become? Was I connected to their soul or to the fantasy that they would finally repair something in mine? These questions may hurt, but they are liberating because the wound wants truth, not fantasy. Fantasy may comfort you for a moment, but truth gives you your life back. There comes a moment when thinking about someone becomes more than memory. It becomes a kind of inner ritual. You may not notice it at first, but slowly, your mind begins to return to them at the same moments. When you wake up, when the day becomes quiet, when you feel lonely, when something good happens and you wish they knew, when something painful happens and you wish they cared, when a night arrives and the world becomes still, their image becomes a place your mind visits, a private room inside you, a place where hope and grief sit together. And this is why longing can feel almost spiritual, because it pulls you beyond ordinary thought. It opens emotions that feel bigger than logic. It makes time feel strange. It makes absence feel alive. It makes someone far away feel strangely close. And if you're spiritually sensitive, you may begin to wonder, is this connection energetic? Are they thinking about me too? Is the universe trying to show me something? Is this a soul bond? Is there a reason I cannot let go? These questions are natural. When a connection touches the unconscious, it often feels mystical. But Jung would invite you to be careful with mystical interpretation, not because the spiritual dimension is false, but because the unconscious can disguise psychological wounds as spiritual signs. Sometimes what feels like a soul connection is truly meaningful, but sometimes it is an emotional wound wrapped in sacred language. Sometimes it is projection. Sometimes it is attachment. Sometimes it is the nervous system craving the person who once activated its deepest hunger. And sometimes it is both. That is the difficult truth. A connection can be spiritually meaningful and still not be healthy. A person can awaken your soul and still not be meant to stay. A relationship can feel destined and still be teaching you how to release. A bond can be real and still not be the place where your peace lives. This is why discernment is so important. Without discernment, spirituality becomes another way to avoid reality. You may call their silence a test. You may call their inconsistency a lesson in patience. You may call their emotional unavailability a divine delay. You may call your anxiety intuition. You may call your obsession telepathy. You may call your inability to move on a soul contract. But Jung would ask, does this belief make you more conscious? Or does it keep you waiting? Does it bring you back to yourself? Or does it make you more dependent on them? Does it create peace? Or does it feed obsession? A spiritual interpretation that removes your dignity is not wisdom. A spiritual belief that keeps you attached to someone who repeatedly hurts you is not awakening. A sign that makes you abandon yourself is not a sign from a soul. The soul never asks you to disappear inside another person. The soul never asks you to betray your own becoming for the fantasy of being chosen. The soul never asks you to confuse suffering with proof of love. Real spirituality brings you into greater wholeness. It does not trap you in emotional dependence. And this is where Jung's psychology becomes so valuable. Because Jung did not separate the spiritual from the psychological. He understood that the human psyche naturally creates sacred meaning. We are not machines. We do not only want facts. We want meaning. We want symbols. We want to feel that our suffering is not random. We want to believe that what broke us might also be guiding us somewhere. And in many cases, that is true. But the meaning is not always the one the ego wants. The ego wants the meaning to be, they are my person. They will return. They are thinking about me. This pain means we are meant to be. But the soul may be offering a different meaning. This longing is showing you where you are not whole. This attachment is revealing your abandoned self. This person awakened your shadow. This pain is asking you to reclaim your energy. This connection is initiating you into a deeper relationship with yourself. That meaning is less romantic, but it is far more transformative. Because if the meaning is only about them, you remain powerless. If the meaning is about your awakening, then even the pain can become a path. Not a path toward chasing them, a path toward becoming conscious. There's a kind of longing that keeps you asleep, and there's a kind of longing that wakes you up. The first one makes you wait for someone else to complete the story. The second one asks you to complete the part of yourself that was left unfinished. The first one keeps asking, what do they feel? The second one asks, what am I feeling? The first one keeps asking, will they return? The second one asks, where have I abandoned myself? The first one keeps asking, was it real? The second one asks, what became real in me because of this? This is the shift from obsession to initiation. And this shift is not easy because the ego does not want initiation. The ego wants certainty. The ego wants the message, the apology, the return, the clear answer, the final conversation, the proof. The ego wants the outer world to resolve the inner tension. But the soul often uses unresolved situations to force inner growth. Not because you deserve pain, not because the universe is cruel, but because certain parts of you only awaken when the old patterns no longer work. Sometimes the person who does not choose you becomes the doorway into finally choosing yourself. Sometimes the silence you hate becomes the space where you hear your own soul. Sometimes the absence that breaks you becomes the beginning of your return. Sometimes the one you cannot forget is not there to be possessed. They are there to reveal what you have forgotten within yourself. This does not mean you should deny the human pain. You may miss them. You may love them. You may feel the ache of what never became. You may grieve the possibility. You may still wonder. You may still feel the invisible thread. But the question is, will you use that thread to strangle your own life? Or will you follow it inward? Because every intense attachment has a thread leading into the unconscious. Most people follow the thread outward, toward the other person, their profile, their messages, their silence, their choices, their possible feelings, their return. But the deeper path is inward. You follow the thread into your own soul. You ask, what is this longing made of? What fantasy is hidden inside it? What fear holds it together? What memory does it resemble? What part of me is still waiting? What did I believe this person would save me from? And if you follow the thread honestly, you often discover that the person is standing at the entrance of a much older story. A story that began before them, before their silence, before their mixed signals, before their absence, before their rejection. Maybe the story began when you first learned that love could disappear. Maybe it began when you had to become useful to be noticed. Maybe it began when your feelings were too much for the people around you. Maybe it began when someone important made you feel replaceable. Maybe it began when you decided, without knowing it, that being chosen by another person would finally prove you were safe. Then this person came into your life and stepped into that old story. And suddenly, the old emotions returned with new intensity. This is why the connection felt so powerful. It was not only present-day attraction. It was past pain looking for completion. A short connection can create deep suffering if it touches an ancient wound. A brief silence can feel unbearable if it echoes a lifetime of emotional absence. One person's uncertainty can awaken the uncertainty you have carried for years. And when this happens, the longing becomes a spiritual lesson because it reveals where your consciousness must expand. It asks you to stop living from the wound. It asks you to stop confusing emotional familiarity with truth. It asks you to stop allowing old pain to choose new paths. It asks you to stop seeking salvation in the person who activated your deepest fear. This is not punishment. This is awakening. Awakening is not always light. Sometimes awakening begins as discomfort. Sometimes it begins as heartbreak. Sometimes it begins as the painful recognition that you have been searching for yourself in someone who could never give you back to you. And this realization can feel like death. The death of the fantasy. The death of the old identity. The death of the version of you who waited. The death of the belief that love must be earned through suffering. But in Jungian psychology, death is often symbolic. Something dies, so something truer can be born. The fantasy dies, so reality can return. The projection dies, so your inner gold can come home. The obsession dies, so your soul can breathe again. The wounded identity dies, so the self can emerge. The self, in Jungian terms, is the deeper center of the psyche. It is not the ego. It is not the image you show the world. It is not the desperate part of you trying to be chosen. It is the organizing center of your wholeness. And often, the self speaks through crisis. through dreams, through repetition, through longing, through the people who disturb us, through the patterns we cannot ignore. So when someone keeps appearing in your mind, the question is not only, how do I stop this? The deeper question is, what is the self trying to bring into consciousness through this person? Maybe it is bringing your shadow, maybe your anger, maybe your longing, maybe your fear, maybe your need for boundaries, maybe your addiction to unavailable love, maybe your forgotten dignity, maybe your capacity to love deeply without abandoning yourself. This is the sacred work, not to worship the person, but to understand the message. Because when the message is understood, the messenger often loses its power. You may still care, but you no longer feel possessed. You may still remember, but you no longer build your life around the memory. You may still feel tenderness, but you no longer confuse tenderness with instruction. This is spiritual maturity, to feel deeply without becoming enslaved by the feeling, to love without turning love into self-abandonment, to recognize a soul lesson without forcing it into a romantic outcome, to honor a connection without making it your prison. There are people who enter your life not to stay, but to reveal. They reveal where you're still hungry. They reveal where you still betray yourself. They reveal where you seek outside what must be born within. They reveal where your heart is open, but your boundaries are weak. They reveal where your spirit is sensitive, but your self-worth is fragile. They reveal where you confuse being needed with being loved. They reveal where you confuse longing with destiny. And if you're brave enough, you can thank the lesson without clinging to the teacher. This is one of the hardest forms of growth, because part of you may still want the teacher. Part of you may still hope. Part of you may still imagine the return. Part of you may still believe that if the story ended differently, the pain would finally make sense. But perhaps the story already makes sense. Not because they came back, not because they explained everything, not because they chose you, but because you finally saw yourself. You finally saw the wound. You finally saw the projection. You finally saw the part of you that had been waiting outside the door of someone else's heart. And now, for the first time, you can open the door from the inside. You do not need to beg for entry into someone else's life in order to belong to your own. You do not need to be remembered by them in order to exist. You do not need their return to prove the connection mattered. You do not need their apology to begin healing. You do not need their recognition to reclaim your worth. This does not mean closure is not beautiful when it comes. It does not mean reconciliation is impossible. It simply means your healing cannot depend on their consciousness. Your soul cannot wait for another person to become aware before it begins to live again. Your awakening cannot be placed in the hands of someone who may not even understand what they represent to you. This is where your power returns. You stop waiting for them to make the pain meaningful. You create meaning through consciousness. You stop waiting for them to release you. You release the part of yourself that made them your emotional authority. You stop waiting for them to choose you. You choose the life that has been waiting for you. At some point, healing begins with a simple but painful realization. Your energy has been living somewhere else. Not completely, not forever, but enough for you to feel divided. Enough for your mornings to begin with someone else's name. Enough for your nights to end with questions no one answers. Enough for your attention to keep leaving your own body and traveling toward a person who may not even know they still occupy your inner world. This is what happens when you cannot stop thinking about someone. Your physical life continues. You still wake up. You still work. You still speak to people. You still smile when necessary. You still do what must be done. But inside, part of you is elsewhere. Part of you is waiting. Part of you is remembering. Part of you is hoping. Part of you is trying to solve a mystery that may never be solved through the other person. And after a while, this becomes exhausting. Not because you are weak, but because no soul can live fully while its energy is scattered across the past, the fantasy, and the wound. Carl Jung believed that psychic energy does not only refer to sexual energy. It is life energy, creative energy, emotional energy, the force that moves you toward growth, expression, meaning, and wholeness. When that energy becomes trapped in an unconscious complex, your life begins to feel smaller. You may lose motivation. You may lose creativity. You may lose appetite for your own dreams. You may feel numb to everything except the thought of them. This is why obsession can feel like love, but often behaves like theft. It steals your attention. It steals your presence. It steals your imagination. It steals your power to create a future. It does not always steal everything at once. It takes small pieces. A morning thought, a night of sleep, a moment of peace, a day of focus, a chance to begin again. And if you are not careful, you may wake up months later and realize you have been more faithful to someone's absence than to your own life. That realization hurts, but it can also save you. Because the moment you see where your energy has gone, you can begin calling it back. Not violently, not with shame, not by pretending you never cared, but consciously, gently, firmly. You begin by telling the truth. I have given too much of myself to this image. I have made this person the center of my inner world. I have been waiting for something outside me to restore something inside me. I have confused longing with love. I have confused uncertainty with destiny. I have confused their attention with my worth. This truth is not meant to punish you. It is meant to free you, because you cannot reclaim energy from a place you refuse to admit it has gone. The first act of healing is honesty. Not dramatic honesty, not public honesty, inner honesty, the kind that says, yes, I still think about them. Yes, I still feel the pull. Yes, part of me still wants the fantasy. But I am ready to understand what this is really about. This is where your power begins. Because once you stop lying to yourself, the unconscious no longer has to speak through obsession. You're listening now. You are paying attention. And the psyche begins to reveal what it has been trying to show you all along. Maybe it says, you wanted them to choose you because you have not fully chosen yourself. Maybe it says, you are not only missing them, you are missing the feeling of being alive. Maybe it says, you became attached to their inconsistency because it matched an old pattern. Maybe it says, you gave them your inner gold. Maybe it says, you were trying to heal a childhood wound through an adult relationship. Maybe it says, you were afraid that if they did not love you, no one truly would. And when these truths rise, do not run from them. Hold them, because they are not here to destroy you. They are here to return you to yourself. The question now becomes, how do you take your energy back? The first step is to stop feeding the symbol unconsciously. Every time you check their profile, you feed the symbol. Every time you reread old messages, you feed the symbol. Every time you imagine what they are doing, you feed the symbol. Every time you create conversations in your mind, you feed the symbol. Every time you search for proof that they miss you, you feed the symbol. And the symbol grows stronger. This does not mean you must shame yourself if you have done these things. Most people do them when they are hurt. The mind is looking for relief, but you must understand the cost. Each time you return to the external person for emotional regulation, you teach your nervous system that your peace depends on them. Each time you check, you reopen the energetic loop. Each time you analyze, you keep your attention bonded to the wound. So you begin with small acts of withdrawal. Not withdrawal from love, withdrawal from self-abandonment. You do not need to announce it. You do not need to become cold. You simply stop offering your attention to the wound every time it demands to be fed. You say, not today. I do not need to check. I do not need to know. I do not need another detail to begin healing. I do not need their current life to determine my current worth. This is difficult at first because the nervous system will resist. The old pattern wants familiarity. It wants the little hit of information, the small hope, the painful comfort, the illusion of control. But every time you refuse to feed the loop, you weaken it. Every time you return to your breath, you reclaim a piece of energy. Every time you choose your own life over the fantasy, you teach your psyche a new truth. I'm safe coming back to myself. The second step is to separate the real person from the imagined person. The real person may have been kind at times, but were they consistent? The real person may have had depth, but were they available? The real person may have awakened your heart, but did they know how to care for it? The real person may have made you feel special, but did their actions honor that feeling? The imagined person always knows what to say. The imagined person always understands. The imagined person always returns with clarity. The imagined person always feels what you hope they feel. The imagined person is made of potential, but you cannot build your life on potential. You cannot heal through someone's imagined version. You cannot keep loving a ghost and wonder why you feel alone. Sometimes you are not missing the person. You are missing the person you hoped they were. You are missing the ending you imagined. You are missing the version of them that existed in the future you created. And grieving that imagined version is painful, but necessary, because until you separate reality from fantasy, you cannot truly move forward. The third step is to reclaim the quality you projected onto them. Ask yourself, what did I believe they gave me? Did they make you feel beautiful? Then beauty is something you must stop outsourcing. Do they make you feel alive? Then your aliveness is asking to be expressed in your own life. Do they make you feel chosen? then the wound around being chosen needs your attention. Did they make you feel safe? Then your nervous system is asking for safety from within and from healthier relationships. Did they make you feel inspired? Then your creative energy is calling you. Did they make you feel seen? Then you must begin seeing yourself with the honesty you wish they had. This is how projection becomes integration. You do not simply pull your energy away from them and leave emptiness behind. You bring the energy into your own life. You become the home for what you once searched for through them. This is why real healing is not only letting go, it is becoming. You become more present, more honest, more rooted, more creative, more loving toward yourself, more aware of your patterns, more unwilling to abandon your dignity, more capable of loving without losing yourself. The fourth step is to let the body heal, not only the mind. Because obsession does not live only in thought. It lives in the body, in the chest, in the stomach, in the throat, in the nervous system, in the sudden rush when you see their name, in the heaviness when you remember their absence, in the tightness when you imagine them with someone else, in the emptiness when you realize they're not coming. You cannot think your way out of everything. Sometimes the body needs to learn that it is safe without them. So when the thought comes, pause. Place a hand on your chest. Breathe slowly. Do not argue with the thought. Do not chase it. Do not follow it into a story. Just say, this is longing. This is my body remembering. This is an old wound asking for safety. I am here now. I will not leave myself. This may sound simple, but it is powerful because every time you remain present with yourself instead of running toward the fantasy, you create a new inner experience. The wound expected abandonment. You get presence. The anxiety expected chaos. You get breath. The child inside expected to be ignored. You give it attention. This is how you become the person you were waiting for. Not instantly, but repeatedly. Healing is repetition in a new direction. The fifth step is to stop making their return the condition for your peace. This is where many people stay trapped. They say, I will be okay when they come back. I will be okay when they apologize. I will be okay when they admit they cared. I will be okay when I understand why. I will be okay when I know they miss me. But this gives away your authority. It places your nervous system in the hands of someone who may never give you what you are waiting for. And even if they do, it may not heal the deeper wound. Because if your peace depends on their return, then your peace is not yours. It is borrowed. It is conditional. It is fragile. So the soul asks for something harder. Can you become peaceful even without the answer? Can you become whole even without the apology? Can you begin again even without being chosen? Can you honor the connection without staying loyal to your suffering? Can you let the unknown remain unknown and still reclaim your life? This is not easy, but it is freedom, because there are some doors that do not close through explanation. They close through self-return. They close when you stop standing in front of them. They close when you realize your life is not behind that door anymore. They close when you walk forward with the part of yourself that used to wait. The sixth step is to ask what your own life is asking from you now. Not what they feel, not what they are doing, not whether they will return. Your life. What has been neglected? What dream has been postponed? What friendship has been ignored? What creative work has been waiting? What body has been asking for care? What room needs cleaning? What skill needs building? What prayer needs returning? What future has been paused? Obsession narrows the world until one person becomes the whole horizon. Healing widens the world again. You begin to remember that life is larger than this story. There are places you have not seen, people you have not met, versions of yourself you have not become, work you have not created, love you have not received, peace you have not yet experienced. And none of it can reach you if you remain emotionally loyal to an absence. This does not mean rushing into someone new. It does not mean filling the emptiness with distraction. It means slowly becoming available to your own life again. At first, this may feel strange, because when you have spent so much energy thinking about someone, your own life may feel quiet, almost too quiet. But stay there. The quiet is not emptiness. It is space returning. It is the room where your soul can breathe. It is the beginning of new energy. Do not rush to fill it with another obsession. Do not panic because the intensity is fading. Peace can feel boring to a nervous system addicted to uncertainty. But peace is not boredom. Peace is safety. Peace is clarity. Peace is the place where love can finally become real instead of compulsive. The final step is to transform the connection into meaning. Not fantasy, meaning. Ask yourself, what did this person teach me? Maybe they taught you that you abandon yourself when you want to be loved. Maybe they taught you that chemistry is not enough. Maybe they taught you that silence triggers your deepest fears. Maybe they taught you that you still seek unavailable love. Maybe they taught you how deeply you are capable of feeling. Maybe they taught you that intuition needs discernment. Maybe they taught you that your heart is alive, but your boundaries need strength. Maybe they taught you that you can survive the ending of a story you thought you needed. When you find the lesson, the pain begins to organize itself. It stops being meaningless suffering. It becomes part of your individuation, part of your becoming, part of the journey back to wholeness. And this is the final Jungian truth. The person you cannot stop thinking about is not necessarily the person you are meant to be with. They may be the person your unconscious used to reveal where you're not yet free. They may be the mirror, the trigger, the symbol, the doorway, the carrier of your projection, the awakener of your wound, the messenger of your shadow. And once you receive the message, you do not need to keep worshiping the messenger. You can bless what was meaningful. You can grieve what hurt. You can release what became unhealthy. You can reclaim what was yours. And you can return to your own center. This is not the same as forgetting. Forgetting says, it meant nothing. Healing says, it meant something, but it no longer owns me. Forgetting says, I must erase them. Healing says, I can remember without abandoning myself. Forgetting says, I must become cold. Healing says, I can remain open, but wiser. Forgetting says, I lost them. Healing says, I found a part of myself through the loss. And perhaps, one day, you will think of them and notice something has changed. Their name no longer tightens your chest. Their memory no longer pulls you out of the present. The fantasy no longer seduces you in the same way. The question no longer rules your mind. You may still feel tenderness. You may still feel gratitude. You may still feel a quiet sadness for what could not be. But you'll also feel yourself more clearly, more fully, more deeply than before. And that is how you know your energy has returned. Not because you hate them, not because you deny the past, but because your soul is no longer living inside their absence. You are here now, in your own body, in your own life, in your own becoming. And this is the moment the spell breaks. Not with anger, not with revenge, not with one final message, but with a quiet inner decision. I will no longer abandon myself to keep this fantasy alive. I will no longer make someone else the keeper of my worth. I will no longer confuse longing with destiny. I will no longer call self-betrayal love. I will take back the part of me I placed in them. I will return to my own life. This is the path of consciousness. This is the path of individuation. This is the path back to the kingdom within. Because the kingdom within is not found in the person who left. It is not found in the one who stayed silent. It is not found in the one you could not forget. It is found in the moment you stop searching for yourself in another human being and finally descend into the truth of your own soul. And when you do, something beautiful happens. You no longer need to ask, why can't I stop thinking about them? Because now you understand. You are not only thinking about a person, you are thinking about a wound, a projection, a dream, a shadow, a missing part of yourself. And once you begin to heal that wound, withdraw that projection, release that dream, integrate that shadow, and reclaim that missing part, the thought begins to lose its power. Not because you forced it away, but because it has completed its purpose. It came to wake you up. It came to show you where you had left yourself. It came to reveal the places where your soul was still waiting to be chosen. And now, you choose yourself. Not once, not perfectly, but every day, every time the memory returns and you come back to your breath. Every time the fantasy calls and you choose reality. Every time the wound aches and you offer presence. Every time you feel the urge to chase and you stay with yourself. Every time you stop asking, do they miss me? And begin asking, where do I miss myself? That is healing. That is freedom. That is the return. And if this person still appears in your mind tonight, do not fight the thought. Do not shame yourself. Do not fall into the old story. Simply pause, breathe, and ask, what part of me is asking to come home? Then listen. Because beneath the longing, beneath the memory, beneath the ache, beneath the fantasy, there is a deeper voice. It is not asking you to chase. It is asking you to awaken. It is asking you to reclaim your attention. It is asking you to stop giving your soul away. It is asking you to become whole. And perhaps that is the real reason they entered your mind so deeply. Not so you would lose yourself forever, but so you would finally find the parts of yourself you had forgotten. So let the memory become a teacher. Let the pain become a doorway. Let the longing become a prayer for your own return. And when you are ready, gently, quietly, without needing the world to understand, call your energy back. From the past, from the fantasy, from the unanswered message, from a silence, from the person who could not hold it, from the dream that did not become real. Call it back into your body, into your breath, into your heart, into your future, into your own life. Because your life is still here, waiting for you. And the love you were searching for through them may begin the moment you stop abandoning yourself. If this reflection spoke to something you have been carrying in silence, subscribe to the Kingdom Within. Here, we explore the hidden patterns, shadows, and spiritual lessons that shape who we become. And remember, sometimes the person you cannot stop thinking about is not the destination. Sometimes they're the mirror that leads you back to yourself.